Before we get to the Slido, we already have a few questions there, so I'm going to just read those questions, but not yet. So I'm going to take a freedom to ask myself first. Haha. The first one is AI, and that question is for Buzz. No, just kidding. Correct? So right now we have, in this age of AI, really huge change already happening, and more will also happen. And besides AI, also several other technologies. And you mentioned in your talk that LeSS is already kind of meeting that and accommodating that change, and in order to meet the challenge, let's say, with the technology and use to the full potential. So. But then, given it's really accelerating, it will impact people. It will impact the amount of change that people need to endure, and especially also us here, coaches and trainers, etc. So I'm curious, and it's a quite open question, how do you, what kind of advices and what do you expect it will happen in the development market, product development market, given that there's so much change is coming, and what we should do in order to meet the challenge?
Was that a question for me?
Yes.
Perhaps first the obvious suggestion is to become a glad developer, generative AI and LLM-assisted developer, and jump on this bandwagon and turn the dial to 11 on yourself becoming a master of these tools, and ideally for multi-learning purposes. So not just using AIs to generate code, but use the AI to help you across the entire spectrum of expertise, from product management to architecture to UI design and on and on. That will not only leverage our current capabilities within companies, but it will also provide a pathway for you as an early adopter coach to others of these ideas, which will, I think, create more opportunities for your career over the short run.
Okay.
For the longer term, like for example, someone was sharing with me last night that they saw a YouTube video interview with Eric Schmidt, the ex-CEO of Google. And he shared in this interview that Google, for the next version of Gemini Pro, is working on features such as the following. And I might be not saying it accurately because I heard this secondhand, but essentially, create a product like Twitter, generate some variations of it, do A/B testing with 10 million users, and report back the analytics. So that's coming. And when we have that kind of power with these AIs, well, obviously that's going to shrink the need for the number of people involved in development. And so I suspect we'll see a world currently going from, let's say, 50 teams or 100 teams of 7 people needed to create giant products, to half of that, and to half of that again, and to half of that again. This is not going to happen over the next 2 years, but I could easily see this happening over the next 20 or 30 years. And so then a broader comment I would make is to create secondary streams of income so that you're not fully reliant just upon one industry for your future income, because it might have a runway which ends.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to take the already first question from, sorry? Don't need to. Too much trouble maybe, if it's too much trouble. So the first question, the top voted question is for Craig, but actually talks about the bus. That's funny. Question to Craig, the bus isn't getting any younger. What's the succession plan?
We're going to have kids.
Or just to finish.
That'll be a scary thought.
Yeah. Or is it like Scrum Inc. and JJ will take over? Exactly. Yeah.
Actually, I'll let Bas talk as well, but there's something that comes to my mind, which I mentioned a few minutes ago, which is that, for example, the first section of the first LeSS book is thinking tools. Because what we're trying to suggest is the empowerment of all of us to ourselves be able to use reasoning ourselves to figure out org design from first principles. Like, we all become systems thinkers, understand quantitative reasoning, human psychology, so that we can come empowered ourselves to figure out org designs that we own and we understand why we think they're going to solve the problems. Not because Bas said so, or Les says so, or Craig says so. And so my emphasis has always been to shift away from the personalities, which is why, for example, I have no interest in ad hominem attacks on other people and so forth, because let's focus on the ideas and let's empower people to just focus on ideas rather than personalities.
Yeah, so I can a bit conclude for this question is that many perceive these are the kind of like a driving force of the LeSS, but the answer is basically you don't want to be in that position. It should be basically very much, can I say it like that?
The thinking tool should be the driving force, from my opinion.
Okay. Is it sustainable? Is it just tools and not leadership?
I don't know, but as most of you know, we've created a company called the LeSS Company. Bastian, who's not a lot younger than me either, but he's leading that at the moment. And just like other companies, it shouldn't depend on Bastian or me. That is the driving force for the training, the site, all of the knowledge, etc. And yes, right now I think we are still the bottleneck in the changes of the LeSS rules, which are very little, and in the final decision process of who's going to be a LeSS trainer and who's not going to be a LeSS trainer. But I think that's almost the only bottlenecks that we are, and at some point we'll need to remove ourselves from the bottleneck and not let it be dependent on us. And we're still around, but it's the same as now. Most of my time I spend in LeSS adoptions because that's where I'm learning more, and I'm just sharing my learning, and I hope that you and all the other trainers can just do the same and just grow this shared knowledge that we have. And the rules don't change a lot, so I don't think we are very much of a bottleneck. Yeah. I certainly hope that if we would die right now, that it wouldn't stop.
Let me expand even further on that question, based on some feedback also in open space, etc., and you participate also yourself. We are clearly getting old, and me too, unfortunately. About younger generation coming, and also regarding that the younger generation has a very different way of looking at things that we might have, and I don't know about making videos. Just to give an example, should be TikTok and not a 600 pages book, maybe, etc. And so, Bastian, how do you got lots of feedback, I think, about all this kind of stuff, and I maybe reflect upon.
Yeah. Is it on? Or not? I don't think this one is on. So yeah, there were several very interesting discussions on how to make the current generation that supports LeSS also much younger again. So we're not the only ones who have that problem.
Make us more younger?
Yeah, that would be awesome if that would be possible. So other organizations like Scrum.org and Scrum Alliance have similar challenges. One of the discussions we had just before here gave a lot of insight and new ideas. It's not new. Last year when I joined similar discussions started to happen as well. And I think together with Dave and Tristan from Scrum.org and Scrum Alliance, we have already been discussing this. No outcome yet. I think Scrum Alliance has already some good initiatives kicked off. For LeSS, the current idea is to grow a younger community through some enthusiastic people that would like to help growing that. And that should be people who are actually younger than we are. And that's usually a very good way of kicking it off. So for now, that will be how we are, let's say, making sure we're not getting old as a LeSS community.
So are you looking for volunteers for the LeSS young community?
Absolutely.
You can try. So then the second one, to all of you, question: what have you learned with 1 year LeSS company CEO-ship? And what are the plans for the future of the community, company, and the LeSS movement? It seems we touched a little bit, but maybe is there more to say? Because it talks about specifically CEO-ship.
Can you repeat the question?
So what have you learned, to all of you, what have you learned with 1 year LeSS company CEO-ship? And what are the plans for the future of the community, company, and the LeSS movement?
Yeah, good question. So what I learned is that the community is super strong. No matter where I am, everybody's willing to put in additional effort, which gave me a really good boost. I think the other thing that I learned is that the best way to sell LeSS is not talking about LeSS. And that, of course, makes it harder to actually sell it. So we're still discussing and experimenting a lot, actually, on how to do that and where to be. The community is way bigger than I ever thought. Every month I discover new communities in countries I really didn't hear about. I try to connect them, and I will continue doing so. For organizations, it's more difficult. So the main thing I learned is that we need to help the existing community to know how do I actually speak to the decision maker and convince him of something that looks like LeSS. Because that's where a lot of the problems are. The other thing which is really key, and we're working on that, is more practical insights of how certain things can be done. There's, of course, the 2 books with a lot of experiments. And today you've seen Bas, his keynote. And I think that's kind of the start of more of this style. And that is also where the future will be. So the LeSS.Works platform will grow. We're forming more partnerships as well to spread the word of LeSS, also inside corporations, because that's where growth will be. Because the agilists of this world, most of them know about LeSS. Most of them actually use parts of it as well. But they have difficulty, let's say, making the next step to actually do an adoption. So I think that's where we focus the most.
And what about the part, what you explained? It sounds still a bit like approaches from our age. So is there any intent or still action to be made in trying in a very different way, more this age way for younger people, younger generations?
Yeah, that was actually more the question you had before. But that's part of the package, I would say. I don't say we have the answer already. For me, it was not a super focus, because there's, you would be amazed how much focus is asked when you join an organization like this. Everybody has really good ideas, but to actually do something with it and make a decision on what is the best priority for everybody, that made the young people not the immediate one. But it's not the first time this one came up, so it will come. But next year we'll have a good answer.
Okay. So next one is for Bas. This example of a sprint backlog in Miro was great today. Any plans to collect such good practice in a common place to share them with the community?
No. At least the second part, no. I don't think sprint backlogs tend to be proprietary for companies, and it's often not useful to just share those. One of the things that's been on my list has been to think about whether some of the sprint backlogs that some of the teams use to change them a little bit so that they're shareable, and then explain how the team works with them and how they changed it over time, so that there are some examples. But I don't think the examples by only the backlog is very useful. It needs to come with an explanation.
And what about that?
And there's already an article about that. So Johan, can you stand up? This is Johan. I work with Johan. And Johan wrote a while ago an article about changing from Jira to Miro also. So just search Johan Jira.
From now on, that's your name?
And then you'll find this article. And in general, that's also related to the previous question. I think 2 days ago I had a discussion with Craig. I always have some dinner and discussions to reflect on what happened all the last year. And one of the things I was sharing with him is that, again, this year I have learned more than I have shared. So the amount of new things I learned is more than the amount of things that I've been able to share. And I hope that we can change that and also share more of that. And I work together with Bastian to try to make more videos and explanations and things like that. And the sprint backlog is just one of those examples of things that are on our list that we definitely need to share more about. Okay. So I apologize for not sharing enough.
Okay, so you started with no, but at the end it became yes.
The no was to the specific request of copying sprint backlogs, because I don't think that is useful.
Okay, yeah, good. So next one, what is your experience to apply LeSS in teams with daily operational tasks, unplanned work? Any of you want to?
I'm not quite clear on the question yet. Is it when a team has a lot of surprise work? Is that the essence of the question that couldn't have been predicted before?
So it seems both, because with daily operational tasks / unplanned work.
I'm going to summarize as surprises. We suggest, and I think we cover this in the third book as a suggestion, to have a rotating role across the feature teams that one might call a surprise team or a support team. And if there's 10 teams in the product, this rotates, for example, each sprint across those teams. And then when one is in the role of surprise team, you might take on no regular product backlog items at all, just to leave maximum slack, or you might take on a few and just drop them if you have to handle surprises. And then in this way, this team can absorb all of the unplanned variability, bugs that weren't known about that have to be handled right away, requests for proposals for estimation related to some contract that the salespeople are working on, and on and on. And then this team can absorb all of that variability so that the other teams can just focus on more of the planned work. With respect to handling defects, since the surprise team will also handle defects, this is a great way for them to learn more, because they'll often then have to go into areas which are less familiar to them. And if in the context of a defect, it's a hot defect, let's say, that needs to be handled really quickly, you can square the circle or move beyond the false dichotomy of it's not the right team who can do it as fast as possible by, for example, having the surprise team reaching out to the super expert if there's some component meant or whomever, and then the surprise team can work with the super expert to solve the problem in those edge cases.
Can I add to that? So what Craig said is what is exactly happening in the LeSS adoption, to add some, that I'm with at the moment, to add some concrete things that they do. In the daily, they look at all of the production metrics, so all of the data flows, traffic, alerts and warnings that come up from the system to decide whether they need to do something. They have an active Slack channel that they automatically monitor. And one of the most interesting decisions that they've made is that for, as Craig said, sometimes they might pick up some items from the backlog still. They decided that once they're on production duty, the only items that they pick up is things that are on the backlog that will make production duty easier, so that there's also no task switch really when they work on the items versus working on production. And then they agreed with the product owner that when you're in production, you can take the items slightly out of priority so that they're always related to production, making production support easier, so that the time over time should be reduced.
Okay. Bus, does the rotation happen every sprint?
Yeah.
Small tip, if they're handling bugs, you can't predict that the bug will end on the last day of the sprint. They often linger on. And so in that case, I personally recommend that if that team is moving back into its feature team role, the people that were handling the bugs take those bugs with them when they move back into the other roles so that you don't get a complicated handoff problem.
Okay, and then Rowan asked the question, what evidence is best to connect LeSS with business results that senior business leaders care about?
What evidence is there? Is that the question?
Let me formulate in my own words and correct me, Rowan, if I do. So, what kind of evidence do we have that benefits of the LeSS for the business results?
Yeah, obviously it is super hard to make an easy cause and effect relationship between LeSS adoption and certain business results, especially since LeSS adoptions often take a very long time. It's lots of variables, so making that link is really hard. One of the LeSS adoptions I've been involved in, that I've been writing a case study about already for 7 years, that hopefully one day will be finished. That starts off, because it's co-authored by the head of product, it starts off with the fact that we'd become market leader in this case, some telecom equipment, and it talks about the different revenue streams that it has cost, etc. So that's the kind of results that you would, I guess, you would be looking for. And I'm very happy it's there. But again, even when it's in my own case study, I take it with a little bit of a skepticism because there's so much variables involved.
So doesn't it make also hard to basically appeal to the leadership? The question also in a similar form came last conference. And so if we say there is no direct connection, then still remains an open question. Why should I spend energy on learning less?
First of all, this is true of every management idea in the world, right? Any book or article that you read that says this management idea caused this result, bullshit. You know, if you study statistics and you know what it requires to identify true causality, it is virtually impossible to identify true causality through management ideas and various business results, except in real narrow cases, point one. Point two, that's why this question in a way is kind of framed as a kind of bottom-up adoption question. But what I suggest, and I think Bus suggests as well, is top-down and bottom-up. It can't just be bottom-up. That is to say, for example, when I work with the senior managers in companies, I don't sell them the idea of LeSS. I coach them in how to think through systems analysis and systems modeling so they can come up with hypotheses that they own the ideas to. For example, like they can see the reasoning that probabilistically having less lists is associated with more probability of working higher value at the company level. And having more lists, this is basic probability, means it's less probable that you'll be working on high value totally at the company. And it's possible for senior managers to do the reasoning and own that idea, for example. Or another example, it's possible through systems modeling for senior managers to see a hypothetical relationship between creating higher value and delighting the customer and then getting more money or more market share. And of course, that's a hypothesis, but everything that managers do is essentially a hypothesis with some rare exceptions. So I encourage not an approach of making proclamations about what LeSS can achieve, but coaching the senior managers for them to figure out possible connections between business outcomes and the system optimizing goal and the things that influence the system optimizing goal, so that they own the conclusions of that.
Okay, so I have the experience, obviously, once you do a CLP, 3 days or something similar, in any case, it requires a significant amount of effort from management to do even systems thinking. So then I know that I'm already halfway through it, and I'm already achieving what I want to achieve. At the very least, they understand what's possibility. The problem is, they don't yet go to CLP. At that moment, what to do? Because they feel, for whatever reason, they feel I need to spend significant investment, time mainly, and so why should I do that? Because their explanation is based on the fact they're actually already learning and spending effort to actually learn.
Yeah. So first of all, I have a selection bias problem in that I only choose to work with companies where the senior leadership agrees to spend at least a day doing this with me before anything else. And so that creates a distorted answer. On the other thing, and I think Bas has been involved more of the bottom-up approach, and so he probably has more to say from that perspective.
Yeah, it's been changing a little bit the last years, but most LeSS adoptions I've been involved in were not LeSS adoptions. They became that over some time, where you work within the organization, simply getting teams to work, improving their engineering practices, and just making bottom-up improvements, and at the same time trying to help management in an organization see why they have certain problems. And not in a way that I know the answer and I'm going to tell you, because that's the least effective way, but in genuine conversations on exploring problems, diving into why. And through that, you're trying to increase that systems thinking, systems view, so that the management starts understanding what actual problems they had. And as I mentioned in my talk earlier, most of the LeSS rules relate to specific dynamics that are common within the organization. So therefore, once they see that dynamic, they often see the alternative that's there. Once you take some of the alternatives together, it already starts looking like a LeSS adoption, and at some point you can make that explicit. It's one of my favorite products. Only after what I considered to be the 5th year in their LeSS adoption did I learn that they were doing something like LeSS. So we decided to get management together and talk about whether they need to officially adopt LeSS, even though they'd been doing all of that already. And they decided, no, we're not going to officially adopt LeSS because we want to do our own improvements. But it does indeed seem useful, so they decided we're going to do improvement guided by LeSS. And I thought this was, in a way, hilarious, because they had taken so much ownership of their product already that they didn't want to adopt the thing that encourages them from taking ownership anymore, and instead just look at that as guidance.
So, continue a little bit more on that. So, what about, so advice essentially you can do that as coaches, as internal people, etc., exactly as you described. But then experience plays a role, and situations tend to be really complex. We had a lovely story from Raiffeisenbank today, where clearly internal people actually made a real change, a real impact. And it's quite impressive. At the same time, I've seen way more situations where they try internally and then it doesn't lead to a meaningful change. Any recommendation, or besides the obvious one?
Change your organization or change your organization.
Most countries have communities and meetups and things like that, and look for other people. Ask for people to whether they can, whether you can visit another LeSS adoption, or have talks with each other to try to support each other. This experience will just grow gradually in the world.
Okay.
And sorry, just to wrap this point up, I think one of the differences I see in more experienced consultants and coaches over 45 years is that they know when to cut their losses, they know when it's just not worth the time. And for younger people, I often see a kind of wishful thinking way beyond any useful point.
Thanks, Greg. I guess that makes me a younger person.
Bastian?
So for, let's say, the outsider, I've been talking to a lot of people on conferences, and the ones who are kind of in the works of starting a LeSS adoption, I recognize quite a lot what Greg and Bas mentioned, and the majority actually says that they have started with some form of session with systems thinking and modeling. So I do believe that that is the right way of investing for yourself and trying to get to the decision maker, get them in the room, and go for that part.
Yeah, on this question, more comes to my mind. This is related to my thinking tools question. Real fan of working with your management, never discussing the word LeSS at all, but just helping them learn about systems thinking, organizational design, seeing waste, and just focus with them at the level of thinking tools. That might be an easier sell, and it might open doors rather than close doors. I'm perfectly happy for an organization to have adopted a bunch of the thinking tools and have never heard of LeSS.
Okay. Next question. From 6 component team POs to 1 feature team PO, from your experience, what are the main challenges regarding the PO role and team structure?
Let me start with the team structure part. Most of the imaginary problems of feature teams never happen. So what I mean by that is, before you change from component teams to feature teams, people imagine all kinds of problems that will happen if you do that. And in most of the LeSS adoptions, none of those problems actually happen. And don't get me wrong, there are problems that you will need to solve. They're just not the ones that people typically imagine that will happen. So in terms of team structure, you will probably restructure your teams if you move to feature teams. And then the main thing you'll need to have, especially in the beginning, is continuously give that message that it is okay to spend more time on something in order to learn it. It's okay to go to a place of the system that you don't know. It's okay to go to another team and ask someone there. In any LeSS adoption that I've been, they're glad to help you with that. Cross-team pairing is super, super common in virtually every LeSS adoption that I've seen. So most of the time it's much less of an issue than people think. The product owner is a bit, also not a big problem, but they're the one feature team product owner, which is a little bit of a weird statement. So I guess just the product owner sometimes needs to learn to not be involved in something. Right? And some product owners are just excellent at that. And sometimes as a Scrum Master, I work with what I sometimes call high maintenance product owners. And they're usually ex-project managers that constantly fall back in their previous habits of diving a little bit too deep. And every time when that happens, as Scrum Master, you take them and you say, hey, we need to have lunch together. Someone once told me that they do that so that they can have lunch from me, but I'm not sure whether that's the real reasoning. And then from the team's perspective, and this is an issue that you need to pay attention to, sometimes they feel that something the product owner ought to do, because in their team product owner setup, somebody did that for them. And unless it's not considered to be product owner responsibility at all, and the team needs to pick that up. So continuous education on making sure that the team understands that they themselves need to clarify the features, write whatever form of clarification. That's all of the responsibility of the team themselves. The product owner should not do that for you.
I'd also like to add the suggestion that when you have this new product owner, that the Scrum Master coach this person to use the following language. At every sprint planning, the product owner basically starts off by saying, it's okay to pick up less items, it's okay to drop items, I encourage that. I want a small amount of work well done rather than a large amount of work poorly done. And because teams will be afraid of this, because that wasn't the traditional culture in many organizations, the repeated verbal communication of this for many sprints will be valuable. And you'd be surprised. You might think, oh, they need to say it once or twice and the teams will change. No, this message needs to be repeated quite a lot.
Okay, next one. For all, what is your personal top takeaway of the conference? One per person.
Yeah, you go.
I would say for a long time I get questions, and in my open space session as well, can we apply LeSS also outside of IT? And that has always been a tricky question, but actually today there was a presentation from Thorben and Joran Hendrik.
Stand up, please.
On how to do it in construction. And that was actually very liberating to see that it's actually accomplished. And also in a way, short-living team spirit, because once it's finished, the team dies again. So worth looking at it, in my opinion. So for me, I think that was something I was looking for. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Next question.
The other people are not all. I think
That's
it was
important.
for all.
Some are more important than others. So anyway, yeah, that got revealed anyway.
I'd like to, it is a very small tip, I was sharing it with my table already. I joined Tom's open space. This is Tom. Tom is always interesting to talk to. He has a philosophy background, which makes every simple topic very complex. But he was talking about joint commitment there, and I love the discussion that we had. And I don't think it was meant that explicit, but from that session, and maybe I learned completely wrong, one of my takeaways is that I want to increase the commitment to, and then I don't mean sprint commitments or silly things like that, but commitments to just any goal. Instead of focusing on what I would like that commitment for, as a coach, I should create more other options, because commitment is related to choice, and the more options I choose, the more likely they will be committed to some of that option. And that would mean that as a coach, you would do exactly the opposite of what you might feel like you would be doing, which is don't focus on the thing you think you want, but instead focus on things that you don't want to create more freedom so that people can make more choices, so that that leads to commitment, and then be open to them not choosing the things that you would like them to choose. So thanks for that. That was my takeaway.
Well summarized. And for me, it was simply Dennis's explanation of his ORCA model. I do a fair bit of systems modeling coaching, and if you didn't attend his talk, essentially it's a way of grouping the variables into 4 or 5 different major categories. For example, outputs and outcomes, and some other categories that are then laid out visually in different areas of the wall or the board, which can make it easier for learners to see the types of variables and the connections between different families of variables.
Now you can do the next question.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So, let me see. When will there be a new version of the LeSS Scrum Guide? New version already? There is already a new version. Okay.
Not anytime soon. We wrote the LeSS Scrum Guide so that we don't need to talk about Scrum anymore.
Okay. Done? That's it? Okay.
Sorry.
Yep. Next question. To Bastian, how is the LeSS doing from branding, partnering, and business development perspectives? What are your business goals for the next year?
So what was the first part of the sentence? I missed that.
Yeah. How is the LeSS doing from branding, partnering, and business development perspectives?
Yeah. Very good question. So last year, the partnering was mostly with other agile-style organizations like Scrum.org and Scrum Alliance. With Scrum Alliance, we have already a partnership, and that will continue, and we'll make it more strong. With Scrum.org, it's still ongoing. And for the rest, the partnership is going with more, let's say, non-agile organizations. And the goal for that is to become more known with that. So you can imagine organizations that help HR or people departments, or organizations that supply knowledge in some form or way to larger corporations. So that style of partnership, that's really what we're looking for, because that's the fastest way of entering the minds of a lot of different people. Also at the right target audience. So that's the focus for the coming year.
Just to react to that, I mean, the Scrum in general and the Scrum business. And
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of discussions on why Scrum and Agile is now, let's say, in a downwards spiral all over the world. I was a few weeks in Beijing, and I heard the same stories. And obviously, the economy is one of the things that companies use as an excuse. But for the most part, the companies have plenty of money anyway. So the real reason, in my opinion, is that the implementations simply were not effective enough. And that doesn't mean that the trainers and the coaches were not good enough. But there is always some reason, and companies fail to look at why did it fail. And then they suddenly think, okay, it's enough. We pumped in a few million, let's stop. And they don't learn. And that gave now a bad name for some, because I know also organizations who are still hiring them and still hiring coaches. So it's not every company that is doing it. So is Scrum out? I would say no. Will there be alternatives? Probably yes. But for me, it's not something to fear. The same for For framework, a lot of people try to avoid it. We do as well. And some for good reasons, actually. But in the end, it's been done forever. Organizations try something else every 10, 20 years. And we're now at that stage again.
Okay, so what about other parts? Business development, regardless of a partnering, but business development perspectives and the business goals for the next year.
Yeah, so the main business goals are to increase the conversion rate for the LeSS.Works platform, and that entails quite a lot. So that automatically means the branding will go up. It will mean the community will grow bigger, because even today I learned about a community in Vietnam, which is bigger than I ever thought, which is awesome.
Did you say Vietnam?
Yeah.
Pool is very popular in Vietnam.
What is popular?
Billiards, pool.
Ah, okay. So yeah, most of the effort will go in that, and that should turn into that organizations, because that's the main goal, are more aware of less. And as you heard before, you do not sell less by selling less. So for us, it means that we still need to name the brand, but it will also mean that we will be able, or we should focus more on the important elements, why less will work for you. And that's what we'll be selling more. And then we add the name LeSS to it.
Okay. If I don't want to be a LeSS trainer, what are the other options to be a part of LeSS community?
I don't think you require to be a LeSS trainer to be part of the LeSS community. All of you are part of the LeSS community.
Yeah, I think I can explain the question, because there's been quite a lot of discussions about it in a kind of like a small group. There is a kind of, obviously there is in a LeSS community, there is a LeSS trainers, and they are deeply involved in all kinds of ways. And also then you have a candidate trainers, which are also a little bit less, but still deeply involved. And then essentially you have the rest. But candidate trainers and trainers are both trainers, only trainers. And so so I'm guessing the question is more how to be more part of the community, more participative, also more welcome in a way. Obviously they are welcome, but to feel welcomed through different ways. And for example, you can think of having a very recognized group of the community, just like trainers and candidate trainers, but who are not that, but they are coaches or something like that.
Yeah, so I had a few of those discussions as well. So apart from the meetups that happen virtually everywhere, both in person and online, I had discussions on this for people who felt I like to do more within the community, and I also like to be, I wouldn't say recognized, but a stronger link with some form of community that I can also reach out to have, I don't know, a trainer talk at my meetup, or have access to special information that is probably already online, but I can get it better or faster, like perhaps a kind of ambassador style role. So that's something I took as an action point. And for other types of communities, you can always ping me on LinkedIn or email, Bastiaan@LeSS.Works, to discuss more if this is not the answer you were looking for.
Another option is also, some people ask me, is it okay to write a case study without the intent to become a LeSS trainer, and that it also gets published if it's a really a good case study?
Yes, please. Yeah, these 2 days I heard already a lot of potential good case studies.
Okay. How does the roadmap for the LeSS.Works looks like? What are the future change plans?
Well, we changed the front page. That's number one. And the rest has to do with the conversion. We have a lot of visitors all over the place, but at the moment we scare off the business people too much. They need to hear more in the business language what the usefulness of LeSS is. And the other part that is missing, in my opinion, is more findability of information. We do get a lot of questions that people say, hey, is this available? And it is on the website, but clearly it was not found. And whether that is, where are the communities? Where can we find books? Where can we find this and this on LeSS? So that's also really important. Ditto, by the way, for where can we find help in form of a coach or a trainer or somebody from the community. So linking, another good one, which will be part of that as well. During these 2 days, I already heard 2 companies saying, hey, we're doing this LeSS adoption, or we're trying to do. Are there any other companies in our vicinity where we can have a look? And there was one open space called LeSS by Example, which is really cool. Everybody is free to join them. They are in Thailand. But we would like to see, can we do this also in Europe and the United States, so that companies are open to invite other people to experience LeSS. So that's one of the goals as well.
Okay, time's up. We have a few more questions. For those questions, I guess you can approach directly the gents here. And, What?
Too bad.
Too bad.
No more questions.
He loves panels. I don't know if you know that. He really doesn't.
You see the enthusiasm.
Yes, I can see the enthusiasm. Yeah. So good. And for the next year or the year after, I remember clearly a number of years ago, we were on a panel with all trainers. So all trainers on a panel, sitting there and oblivious to what's going to happen, etc. And then somebody says, all white men, no woman. So next year or the year after, need to work really hard to have more women in a community in general, but also the trainers. So that's I wanted to say that and use that time to do it.
I think there's already a lot.
Thank you.
It's more this year. Yes, definitely. What's next? Break?
That guy.
No. No more breaks. So, the idea was that now we have the last duty for you. So please don't leave. Yeah. Then you will not know where the conference is next year. Yeah? So we tell this only after this exercise. So please now for the last time reflect. This was a very insightful panel discussion. I hope for you, at least for me it was. And maybe you have some open questions. So what are there still? Something you'd like to discuss? And then in the end, so we spent maybe half an hour on that one still. And then please, we want to hear from you. What are your highlights? So we would like to ask from each table 1 or 2 highlights to hear from this conference. And after this, we are closing the conference. Okay? Half an hour, please reflect in your teams.